So we're going to tear down a 4L80E. This one has already been built previously. I'm having my daughter help me film this. Start off by getting a 15 millimeter, 13 millimeter, 10, an 8, and a Torx 40. We also need a 3/8 12-point socket for the center support bolt, some snap ring pliers, flathead assortments. I've been looking for this flathead that has like a little notch cut in it that aids in getting the snap rings out that are kind of deeper in the case. Bust out the tried and true Ingersoll Rand 3/8 inch. Get these 6 15 millimeter headed bolts out that hold the extension housing to the transmission. Judy chopped this extension housing off like a boss. Take the 2 speed sensor bolts out. They're 10 millimeters on this one, sometimes they're 8s. I mentioned this was built before, looks like by some hack at A, and it moving right along. You have to remove the rear cooler fitting on the late model ones. You'll see in a minute why. Time to tip it over on your bench. Make sure your buckets are empty enough. This one isn't, so we'll switch her over. Now it's time to take the 17 pan bolts off. Sometimes I can do this quick and look like I know what I'm doing. I think I did all right here. I don't know if the fluid's ever been changed on this transmission, but the pan, like the bottom of it, will give you an indication if something's starting to come apart or if something's going on inside of the transmission. This one looks really good, so I'm pretty satisfied with that. Next up, we'll get the internal harness off. Kind of just pry backwards. It's kind of obvious if you look at it how to get them off of there, and we'll throw this one away. Once in a while you can reuse this internal harness, but this one's leaking through like where the pins are, so it'll go in the bin. Now we're gonna unbolt the manifold pressure switch. They're 8 millimeter headed bolts. They're all the same length, so you can't mix those up, so that's cool. I did a Savannah van transmission one time for a drywall company, and I saw this tool inside of it and it looked like it would be really useful for us, so I took it from them. There's a little bracket with a 10 millimeter bolt on it that holds the front half of this lube tube in. I forgot to get that on video, but just gently pry that out. Now it's time to take all the 10 millimeter headed bolts out that hold the remainder of the valve body in. These are all the same length on a late model 4L80, so you can't mix those up either. This is the intermediate coast band servo. Take that out and throw that in there. And then these are the low reverse servo cover bolts. They're all 10 millimeter. If you're ever going to attempt this yourself, I recommend you buy yourself an ATSG manual for a 4L80E. You can find them on Amazon or eBay. That book does a really good job explaining all like the variances through the years and the differences and the part names, etc. Now grab your Torx 40. You'll need that to get the bolt out so you can pull the overdrive piston out once you get the pump out of the way. And now you'll need your 3/8 12-point. This is for the center support bolt. Now you'll get the 13 millimeter out, and there's 7 pump bolts that hold the pump into the case. You'll back those out. There's an O-ring on the input shaft that I already took off, but make sure you take that off before you try to pull the pump forward. Next, you'll just pry the pump out with a little flathead right here. Try to gently pry right here on the back of the cast iron pump and use like that little piece of aluminum as leverage. This will go quick. Pop the pump out, And pull the pump out of the way. Then next is the input shaft slash overrun drum slash overdrive planet. This is the overdrive piston right there and clutches. This is the forward drum coming out right here. This is the direct drum coming out right here. And then next is the intermediate coast band. And then we'll take these all apart individually here in a minute. So this is, obviously a flathead screwdriver that I've got a little notch cut in. This one's kind of worn out. And I kind of struggled here because I was trying to show how to use it. But essentially you just stick it in behind the snap ring and then twist it. And then it'll allow you to pull it beyond the case lug. The transmission still has all the forward gears, but I suspected we would see some damage here on the intermediate clutch pack. At a certain power level, intermediate clutches are just basically a wearable item. Jake's Performance has a really good video explaining like how long the 1-2 or the intermediate circuit is and why this is, but all things considered, this came out looking pretty good. I want to say the customer told me it had like 60 or 70,000 miles on this transmission. Like he daily drove it for 4 years, and it saw 800-900 horsepower all the time. So that's pretty good in my opinion. Next up is the chamfered snap ring that holds the center support in. That comes out, and it's a cushion. Pull the sun tube out really quick, and then that's the front planet stuck to the back of the center support. That's normal sometimes. This is the main shaft, rear planet, output shaft, sun gear, etc. That all comes out as one. There's a snap ring in the back of the rear planet that holds all that together. We're gonna assemble it externally, do like a bodies exhibit with all the guts of a transmission, show you what that all looks like outside of the case. Put the front planet back on. You have to wiggle it a little bit to get the teeth on the planets to spline into the sun gear. Once that drops down, then we'll put the washer that separates the front planet and the center support in. I use the sun tube to align that bearing that's getting dropped right there. That makes it easier because there's a step that sits inside the center support, and then you got to twist the center support to get it to drop through the low roller clutch. I wanted to show you the lube tube. That's the rear cooler line fitting. It goes into there, and that provides lube. So this is called a center lube for LADE. You have to take that apart when disassembling the take that out when disassembling the transmission. That's where the intermediate clutches go. I'm not going to leave that in. It's a nightmare to try to get those to spline into the direct drum, which is what just got dropped. And then there's a washer that goes right there. A lot of times I'll put a bearing right there. You have to do some machine work, but wiggle that to drop the forward drum through the direct clutches. That's actually called a direct clutch hub that's splining into it. Then that's the overdrive piston with all the clutches in it. I think I'll probably take the clutches out right here because that's a little tricky to drop the overdrive planet through a bunch of wet clutches in the overdrive piston right there. These clutches should look pretty good because normally you don't go wide open throttle into fourth gear. It's not that it can't, it's just it slows the car down. You can still see the writing on some of those clutches. That top one's a little bit warm. You see it's darker than the rest, but those will get tossed out and replaced. Toss the overdrive piston up there, then the input shaft, overdrive planet, overrun drum. That's all that arrangement, or that whole setup right there. Wasn't sitting all the way down. You gotta wiggle it, and then overrun drum falls, and then sling the pump up there. I believe the pump's like 25 pounds. I haven't measured or weighed everything individually. I know the direct drum is like 15 pounds, so this whole arrangement right there is probably like 110, 120 pounds. I'd like to thank our sponsor for the video today, Starfire Energy Drinks. These really come in clutch when it's been a long day and you just need a little more energy to get through teardown. I'm kidding. Please, YouTube, don't demonetize me for this joke. We're going to take the overdrive piston apart right now. First thing you have to do is take the snap ring off that holds the return spring in place. There's like these little half arcs that kind of capture it. Once you find the opening, you can kind of just push down with one hand and peel it off the other side, just like this. Next up, we're going to take apart the forward drum. Once again, there's a snap ring holding that clutch hub in. Just find that opening, peel it off, take the clutch hub off. That was the forward hub I just pulled out. A couple washers. Clutches are in incredibly good shape. That's clear evidence of, multiple things: proper tuning, proper fluid level, proper shifter cable adjustment, etc. These clutches aren't bad per se, but they're going to get thrown out and replaced. This is the forward clutch return spring. Compress that, take the snap ring out, and then you can pull the piston out. Onto the direct drum disassembly. Peel this snap ring out right here. The clutches are going to be in really good shape because it was used properly, like expressed before in the forward drum. You can still see the part number there on the clutch. Still going to throw them out, put new ones in because this unit's getting a trans-brake. It'll get a different style clutch right here. Here, we're going to pop the return spring off for the direct clutches, same way. And then pull the piston out. That'll get replaced because I'm sure that's been pretty hot. It's a spiral ring that holds that plate. That's what captures like lube oil in for the intermediate sprag. As soon as I get the intermediate sprag out, you can see it's a 34 element sprag. There's 34 lugs. There will be like flat spots on the lugs on the inner part where, it's overrunning in third and fourth gear, and that's what wears it out. So that will get replaced as a part of this rebuild. This is the center support. I'm just going to be talking about sort of the major components, like the things like those washers. That's where an ATSG book would come in handy. Take off the sealing rings on the center support, and then the intermediate clutch return springs and backer. Peel the piston out. Peel the seals off the piston. And then next up is the low roller clutch / sprag that's in the front planet right here. If you drop it on the bench and one of the rollers falls out, that's how you know if it's bad or not. So if you watch right here, one of the rollers falls out, it's done, throw it in the trash. What we're checking for here is thrust play on the planet. There's a spec in the book, I can't remember what it is, but I'm also checking for like rock or axial play, if you want to call it that. If there's any of that, then just scrap it right away. If the pins look really hot, that's another good indication that it's bad. This is the sun gear. You're going to look for like scarring or heat or inconsistencies. That's going to indicate like a previous lube failure, and at that point, obviously, you'd want to find another sun gear, but this one looks pretty good. This requires sort of a special tool that we made. It's a flathead with a little notch cut in it. You find the opening, get it underneath that little lip, pry it out. Sometimes that can be tricky. Thank God I didn't look too dumb doing this, and then that will allow you to get the output shaft off and away from the main shaft / rear planet ring gear / rear planet. Checking the rear planet for a thrust play. It's a little trickier. There's a little less room inside of that housing. This one checked out good. As you can see, there's no like hot spots on the face of where the pins are, so that's also good indication that it's never been really, really hot. Now time for the ceremonial throw of all the bad parts into the scrap bin. Snap rings and washers and bearings will all get washed by hand in the solvent parts washer. These internal parts and bolts and every other hard part will go inside the heated parts washer. Thank you for watching. That's a little how-to sort of on how to knock down a 4LADE. Take the gloves off. These soft hands will live to fight another day. Kobe.